Welcome back everyone to the Aurelia city in City Skylines. Today we have a really interesting project in front of us. We will continue building right next to the places from the last episodes, where we did the cargo harbor, the solar towers, the light rail extension for example, and the cargo ships canal. Right next to the canal we will build a greenhouse farming area. We will prepare some custom greenhouses and other buildings that are going to create some futuristic look in place. We are also going to continue building the main road on the side of the river, so we are going to see today the light rail again, and we are going to build for it some nice elevated station. And on top of that, we are also going to extend the pedestrian highway, so let's go. Okay, so we are going to start by placing the buildings that are later going to form the greenhouse, the farming area, okay? So I downloaded new buildings for this purpose, and most importantly, that's going to be this one, this kind of a dome. It's kind of like a mushroom actually, but I only decided to take the dome from it. I of course converted it into procedural objects so that I can make it smaller, which is just going to fit this area better. I suppose that the dome is also some kind of a greenhouse building, maybe like an office partially, or something like that. And these actual greenhouses, these with the retractable roofs, those are going to form the main part of the entire area. So I think that all of these buildings are made by quad rioters. I really do like using buildings from them because they look nicely futuristic and they perfectly fit the style of the city. At least some of them do. Now, I am trying to make these buildings because these buildings are growables, which means that they can be only 4x4 tiles long or big, but I'm trying to make them much longer, as you can see. So again, I'm converting them into procedural objects and then scaling them up along the length axis so that they are just longer like this, and that's going to fit our purposes much better. Now, there are two kinds of these buildings in the workshop, the one with the roof retracted and the one which is open like this. And I'm going to use the one which is open to slightly detail it inside a bit more, to add the grass, of course, into it. And I'm also adding some kind of like a path because, it needs some kind of an area where people can walk and tend to the plants. And later, towards the end of the build, actually, when I'm actually going to be positioning these buildings into the place, I'm going to be also putting in some decals for like dirt and all kinds of stains, and of course the actual plants. Now, I'm thinking that this area is probably not intended for like growing plants or, crops for the entire city. Obviously not. It's going to be way too small for that. But I'm also thinking of this place as some kind of a research area, maybe like a continuation of the research center that we did a couple of episodes back, because we are kind of close. This place is going to be very well connected to the entire university campus because you have the pedestrian highway and all the public infrastructure. Actually, now that I think of it, the line of trams that are going to go directly through this area, that's exactly the line that goes through the new part of the university. It actually kind of goes close to the old part as well. So yeah, public transport is very well taken care of, and it's not really that far. People can easily walk here as well. Now, this place is going to serve also as an extension of the industrial zone when it comes to the trains. So we obviously have the trains, the cargo train rails that are just aiming from the cargo harbor in here. They're obviously crossing that canal. Oh, by the way, we're also going to complete today that nice custom railway bridge that is crossing the canal. So that's going to happen too in just a couple of minutes. But in here, I decided to put a functioning cargo stations. Now, unfortunately, when I was recording cinematics for this episode, I still didn't get any cargo trains to go into this cargo station, which is kind of weird. Aurelia kind of works weird with the outside connections. Pretty much every time I start the save, the cargo just decides to spawn from different directions outside of the city. I'm no longer touching the outside connections limits, but yeah, like I said, every time I start the save, the cargo traffic just decides to pick like one entrance from outside of the map, either a road or cargo railway. and that's where the majority of cargo is going to spawn. And when I was trying to record cinematics for this episode, unfortunately, the game just didn't cooperate and didn't decide to spawn the cargo trains that would actually go through this area or into this cargo station. I think I actually made it so that I'm not really sure what exactly I did. I obviously connected these tracks all the way to the tracks that are leading to the cargo terminal on the airport. So we finally completed that line, and I think I used the same technique I used for that highway entrance that I kind of placed inside some of the harbor buildings, if you remember. So it's going to spawn traffic, and I think I did something similar for cargo railway, but in the airport, so that we have 2 points of entrances on both sides of this cargo line. One which is kind of on the side of the map outside of the industrial zone, the old one, and the fake one, which is now inside the cargo terminal in the airport, okay? But like I said, the game just didn't decide this time that that's going to be the place where cargo is going to originate from. So unfortunately, I couldn't record any cargo trains to go through this area, but this place is functional with this cargo terminal, as you can see here. By the way, this is a very old building of the cargo terminal. I do remember I was using exactly these buildings in the Rockdale series that I was doing first on this channel a very, very long time ago. But this building is still probably, in my opinion, the best looking cargo terminal available right now. So I'm gladly going to use it, especially because it comes with matching warehouse buildings. So you can actually extend this building quite nicely, and that's exactly what I'm going to do in, again, just a couple of minutes. Oh, by the way, I was recording this, or building this, when I still didn't have the network multi-tool, and this is exactly the place that I did in that network multi-tool tutorial, and this was exactly the place that, that led me to do that segment in the network multi-tool tutorial, where I showed you how these kinds of ends of train yards would be so much easier with those tools that are now available to us. So what I basically was doing there, I just picked like a random track that was going kind of diagonally through the area, and then I was just randomly connecting all those little sidings to it, right? But it was just so difficult to do that, and obviously in the time-lapse I cut it up a lot, but yeah, if I had the network multi-tool, this would have been done in like 5 minutes, but unfortunately I still didn't have it in here. But I do now, so that's nice, Anyway, that's almost done with the railway. Now I just put some kind of more of these domes in there on the sides of the area, and a couple of roads to just mark the sunken place for the railway. Because as you can see, there is like a trench for the railway and the cargo station, which is going to just add some kind of vertical element to the area, which is why we are watching Aurelia series, right? So we have to have that pretty much everywhere. Which is nice, I like building those. Now we also need to connect or complete the canal on the other side, the cargo barges canal, and there's no point in really figuring out something new in here, so I'm just going to cover it with some grass networks, some grass ploppable surfaces, and of course lots of trees and rocks. I really do enjoy building those rocks lately, just putting them on those kind of like landscape, slightly uneven terrain, and it's just super satisfying to do that because it's just a couple of clicks away from doing some really interesting terrain. So I really, really do enjoy doing that, and we are going to see that a lot more in this episode actually. So I'm also doing already some kind of final detailing in some of these places. I do remember that I was doing this on the live stream, and I was not exactly sure how this place is going to continue, going to expand, and every time I'm not exactly sure about this, it's always a good idea to just start doing this final detailing and all this nature detailing as well in the places that I already have finished almost, at least with the rough cut of the buildings, right? Because it's just going to give you a better picture how you need to continue. So that's exactly what we are doing here. Now also, this is the end of the bridge for that tram line. That's exactly the one that I was talking about, that eventually goes into the university campus, the new one, and continues back into the island city, right? So that's where it ends, basically. Now, this is also going to be the tram line that I will connect to the tracks that we already built in the suburbs, and eventually this line is going to continue to the airport. So it's going to be probably, well, maybe not the longest line in the city, but very, very long anyway. Maybe like the second longest at least. So that's going to be nice. And it's going to use the rail trams. It's already using it. So it's just something new so that there's more variety with the trams. But anyway, I completely forgot to talk about that little parking lot that I did in front of the main dome, which is pretty much in the center of the area. So that was another example of what you can do with the node controller mod and how you can really manipulate any kind of network you decide to, especially roads, railways, obviously, but even decorative networks if you wanted to. But in this case, I was using the parking lot as basically a decorative network just to fill that place. Because in City Skylines, really, what is the most difficult place to fill? It's usually some kind of irregular shape, right? City Skylines is kind of made, and even the workshop content is kind of made for, 90-degree corners and these kind of square blocks, square areas. But every single time you can do some kind of detailing or just building blocks or something that is going to fit these kinds of irregular shapes, that's always like super satisfying. And it just adds like a very high level of customization to your city because of exactly the fact that the game and all the kind of content around it is just made for those 90 degrees. So if you can get away from that from time to time in some places with either like round buildings or triangular shapes, already, then that's just really good. That's something that I really want to do every chance I get. Okay. So that place was really nice. It's actually a very similar technique that I did in that old university campus that we did just a couple of episodes back, really, where I also used a very similar technique, even though I didn't really change the shape, that much, only just slightly to really symbolize that the parking lot fits that area nicely. So that was really satisfying. That's like a nice place to have in the center of this area. Anyway, I'm already doing these smaller greenhouses right on the sides of those larger greenhouses. Now, I basically created like a couple of rows of the large greenhouses, and on the sides of them, I'm going to do these small ones, the original ones, the growable versions of the buildings, the ones that are actually going to be functional. And I just did that to have more variety of buildings in there, and also because I'm kind of running out of space on these edges, and I wouldn't really fit these large greenhouses in there. This is just a good idea to really fill that place and not have it all that regular, all that orderly. These kinds of shapes, because that's kind of what I'm aiming for in here. Now back to the rocks, decals, and trees. So I'm pretty sure I already said this like a million times before, even in other like previous videos. But yeah, doing these kinds of nature detailing, that's something that I really do enjoy doing in these past couple of projects that we did, because I kind of need to also continue with that, because I'm obviously trying to keep the styles similar. But yeah, like I even said in this episode, it's just very nice to just fill some larger areas on the map. And we are definitely not in the downtown. We're actually quite far away from the downtown. So I do need to do these kinds of open places, not really fill every single square meter of the terrain with some kind of structures, right? Because that's just going to look much better when you just zoom out and look at the city from a bit further away. Now, I'm trying to do also some kind of detailing down here. I'm not really going to overdo it too much. I'm doing a couple of open spaces with pavement that I'm going to just detail with some decals, because we are technically in some kind of industrial area still. So doing these kinds of areas a bit dirty is going to make a lot of sense. Some kind of storage tanks here and there, and a couple of parked vehicles. I'm definitely liking and enjoying using those new vehicles that I got from the workshop recently, the D3S, electric cars, the electric delivery vans especially. They look really, really good. They're exactly what Aurelia needs, okay? So I'm going to be using them. You're going to be seeing them a lot more. Now, there was this little transition because we are going to leave that farming greenhouse area behind us, at least for now. We're going to return to it, it's not done. And we're going to do something with the infrastructure, and especially the second end of this bridge over the canal, over the start of the canal, where we need to sort out not just the avenue, but the pedestrian highway and the light rail as well. So these are three networks, and they kind of need to be separated because the light rail, logically needs to have its own level so that it can just do its thing. It's a light rail after all. It should be a rapid transport, and the pedestrian highway, it also kind of needs to be disconnected from everything else because pedestrians and cyclists should go on it uninterrupted and kind of fast wherever they need to go. So this pedestrian highway is going to form some sort of a border between that industrial/farming area and this place on the waterfront. This place on the waterfront is going to be largely high density. We are going to build some kind of high density buildings right at the start of that canal, and this is just going to continue all the way to the areas that we already built. By the way, there's still going to be a little gap in there. We're not really going to do this waterfront completely because that's going to be the topic of the next episode. I have some very nice plaza project prepared for the next one, so that's kind of going to finish that overall area, and that's going to be really satisfying to finally look at this place. But anyway, I'm jumping ahead a bit because now I'm going to build that promised light rail station. So this elevated light rail station is going to serve pretty much the people, the passengers that want to go from the downtown, or rather from the part of the downtown on this side of the river. Pretty much the people that want to go into that farming area, or maybe even these high rises that are right next to it, but not really more than that. So I'm not really trying to make this station look super big. I'm only going to provide a couple of benches on the top and just a few shelters. But I'm still trying to make it look nice, even though it's not really going to be all that super big like we did, for example, in transfer stations or something like that in previous episodes already a long time ago. So what I'm doing in here is I took the industrial building that I think got recently. I'm not really sure, but I think that's the quad building again. And I converted it into PO. I sunk it quite a lot so that only these little towers, let's say, are sticking out. The one tower is going above the light rail level, and the second tower is actually on the same level as the light rail, and that's going to be like an outdoors place where I'm going to put some tables or something, and it's going to be like a little restaurant maybe, so that when you get off the light rail, you can immediately just go and buy a coffee or ice cream or something like that. So that's going to be kind of nice. And it's also going to serve as some kind of a viewing platform because we are on the waterfront. And we are actually, we are directly opposite of the sports center. So there are the stadiums that are looking really grand, from afar. So that's going to be just a nice place to maybe even, just go to just see the city. You might take your bicycle, you might drive around, ride around the pedestrian highway, and maybe stop here, like I said, grab an ice cream or something, and just take a look at the rest of the city, the skyline, and things like that. Okay. But anyway, enough of that. Let's talk more about this detailing that I'm doing here. So I'm doing lots of trees. I'm doing all kinds of rocks, really, because the light rail is kind of on an embankment that's very steep on this side. So a couple of retaining walls here and there that are kind of incorporated into the high rises, and just rocks where it isn't, because I like rocks. I think I already mentioned that. I'm not really sure if I did, but just to make sure, I'm going to mention that again. Okay, so these are the tables. I'm thinking that this building probably has some kind of a connection to the lower levels, so you can just go through the building. all the way down, even though there is that pedestrian ramp that kind of twists down on the street level. So you can easily just use that. I was mostly just doing that station area so I can have a better idea where I can do the pedestrian highway, because like I said, the pedestrian highway is going to form like a dividing line between that waterfront place and the industrial place, okay? So that was kind of needed to do that. So as you can see, I also did some kind of warehouses on the side of that cargo train station, because everything is kind of connected to everything else in these kinds of open space project, let's call them, right? So the kind of projects where you have just a really big place on the map that you need to fill. And it's not really going to be like super density place. You kind of need to think about some forest areas maybe as well, or some kind of nature. And you need to combine that with the sizes of the buildings, because you cannot really just do the infrastructure completely randomly, because you are limited by the buildings that you have, and they need to fit with the infrastructure. And you also have the public transport and all these kinds of aspects that you just need to combine in the designing process, right? So it's usually best to not really focus on one thing, or I usually see people just do infrastructure first, and then they kind of think about how they're going to do the buildings, right? But that's exactly not very efficient, because of what I said. You don't really have buildings that are like every sizes, you cannot just build infrastructure with super weird sizes or shapes and think that you're just going to fill that with some buildings later. That's kind of the approach that I'm also sometimes doing. That's going to be a problem that my future me is going to solve, but that usually doesn't work, and I'm usually just cursing at my past self when I do that. So I usually try to just do a couple of infrastructure things here and there, put some buildings there, and then move on to some different places where I'm just going to work on top of what I just did and return, and iteratively kind of work my way towards just completing the overall area. So that's exactly like a typical situation in here in this particular project. In the downtown, it's not really going to be the same thing, because in the downtown I'm going to be mostly using some kind of large high rises that are kind of having very similar footprints, so I can afford to do the infrastructure first. But in these kinds of more open areas, like I said, it's not exactly the most efficient approach. Anyway, that was pretty much the rough shape of this place done while I was explaining this. I also added these ponds in the area. I'm thinking that these ponds, again, might be some kind of research, might have some kind of research purposes. I don't know, some kind of special kinds of fish might be cultivated in here. How do we even say that? Cultivated? That's probably not the right word for it, but whatever. And it might just be research, the possibilities of like breathing them or something like that. I don't know. Or maybe it's like a experimental water treatment plant or something like that. Like I said in the beginning, I'm considering this place to be some sort of a research center, partially at least. Okay, so this tram line is also running on some kind of an embankment, so I'm creating this nice slope with the rocks on it, exactly the same rocks that I used before, because I really do like rocks. Did I mention that already? And I'm also creating this entrance. That's actually going to be, well, it's not going to be functional, but I consider that to be like an underground entrance to that main dome, so that if you get off the tram or you just park your car, you're going to go to work here, you're going to park your car in the center parking spot, then you're going to go into that center dome, and if you need to go into these greenhouses down below, then you're just going to take some elevator or stairs from the dome and going to use that side entrance down below there. Okay, so that's going to be nicely convenient for the workers. Now we are almost finished, and like I promised, this was a very nice thing to do. These open greenhouses, I finally copied them in. I had them stored someplace else, and I finally copied them in. I just did randomly some greenhouses open, some closed, and the open ones I am going to detail with all kinds of decals, mostly dirt, and some of these trees. I'm usually trying to place like exotic looking trees, maybe actually in these kinds of greenhouses, the trees that are later I don't know, replanted into some plazas in Aurelia or something, are actually grown here. So, we might think of it as that as well, as that kind of purpose. Anyway, this is the finished thing, the before and after transition, and you can see that we filled a huge area, and there really is that dividing line that is very, very apparent, which is nice, that I was aiming for, between the greenhouse place and the waterfront high density. By the way, on the waterfront, I used the very nice looking, recently downloaded building from the workshop, and I of course forgot its name. It's the long building. I'm pretty sure if you are going to search by most popular in like 1 month or something, you're going to see it in the workshop. It's really nice. It's a very big footprint building. That's always what I like to have, because you can just place it, a single click, and it's going to fill a huge area. It's kind of a similar situation with the nature, with the rocks that I'm doing. Anyway, this kind of shot that's tying nicely together with the previous areas as well, that's really, really satisfying. I like how we did the cargo harbor, which is like super dense, basically no grass inside of it, no grass patches. Then we also did that industrial zone on the side of it, which is slightly less density. And then we did this greenhouse farming area, which is a lot less dense than those places. So it's just gradually decreasing the density. And it's overall just, working together really, really well. I'm really satisfied with this project, I have to say. It turned out looking good. Now also we did some landscaping around the entire greenhouse area, so that it's basically going to be inside its own, well, not really a valley. The valley is kind of the entrance road here, as you can see, but overall it's going to be like a little plateau. No, plateau is up, the opposite of plateau, I suppose. So I'm also doing this because there's going to be like a low density residential area right next to it. So I kind of wanted to provide some, like a natural obstacle that's just going to prevent some noise issues and those kinds of things. And by the way, the railway obviously goes into the tunnel in here, which is just going to go underground all the way to the suburbs, where we did the other end of the tunnel long time ago. So we finally connected that, but I already mentioned it. Anyway, guys, next episode we are going to do some kind of wrapping up in some of these areas, and after next episode we will have one half of the city completely done. On this side of the river, the entire city is going to be 100% completely done. We're going to focus on the waterfront. We will see more of the light rail. We are going to build a huge plaza where the light rail is going to go through. So a huge station and, all these kinds of things. Really stay tuned for that, okay? So, thank you for watching today's episode. Hope you liked it. If you did, then you can always put thumbs up below. You can write some comments. And you can also become a channel member if you want to directly support the channel. Big thanks to all the current channel supporters. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching again. Take care and goodbye.